In a dramatic turn of events, President Donald Trump's meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House erupted into a heated confrontation that has sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. Expected to be a pivotal discussion focused on U.S. support for Ukraine amidst its ongoing conflict with Russia, the encounter quickly devolved into a public shouting match, leading to the abrupt cancellation of a planned press conference and the signing of a critical minerals deal. The confrontation, which unfolded in the Oval Office, saw Trump and Vice President JD Vance berate Zelenskyy for what they described as disrespectful behavior. "You're gambling with World War III," Trump admonished, questioning Zelenskyy's gratitude for U.S. support. He emphasized, "You don't have the cards," and insisted that Zelenskyy should be more appreciative of the assistance provided by the U.S. The tension escalated when Vance accused Zelenskyy of being disrespectful for engaging in a debate during the meeting, prompting an equally fiery response from the Ukrainian leader. Zelenskyy, who had arrived with hopes of finalizing a deal that would grant the U.S. access to Ukraine's abundant rare earth minerals, found himself at the center of an extraordinary diplomatic debacle. Despite previous expressions of gratitude toward the U.S., he was pressed by Vance to acknowledge his appreciation during the meeting, which resulted in an emotionally charged exchange. In response to the increasingly hostile atmosphere, Zelenskyy reaffirmed Ukraine's commitment to peace and security, stating, "Thank you, America, thank you for your support." The fallout from this incident has been swift and polarizing. Republican lawmakers, including Representative Mike Lawler and Representative Don Bacon, characterized the meeting as a disaster for U.S. foreign policy, with Lawler commenting that having such a confrontation unfold in public was extremely unfortunate for Ukraine. On the other hand, many GOP members rallied around Trump, framing his confrontational stance as a necessary assertion of American interests. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins hailed the exchange as a sign of a strong American leadership, while Senator Mike Lee praised Trump for standing up for our country. Democrats, however, were quick to condemn the meeting. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer accused Trump and Vance of effectively doing Putin's dirty work, while Senator Chris Murphy labeled the episode a sad scene and an utter embarrassment for America. Such sentiments highlight the deep political divisions in Washington regarding support for Ukraine and the broader implications of U.S. foreign policy. As Zelenskyy departed the White House without securing the anticipated minerals agreement, the implications for Ukraine's security and economic future remain uncertain. The meeting, initially anticipated as a step toward a collaborative approach to countering Russian aggression, has instead left both sides with a sense of unease and a lack of clear direction moving forward. The abrupt end to the discussions reflects the precarious state of diplomatic relations and the challenges facing Ukraine as it continues to navigate a complex geopolitical landscape. In the aftermath, Zelenskyy reiterated his commitment to peace in a post on social media, thanking the American people and expressing a desire for a just and lasting peace. As Washington grapples with the fallout from this extraordinary diplomatic exchange, the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations hangs in the balance, with many observers questioning the viability of continued cooperation under the current administration. As the situation evolves, all eyes will be on the next steps both leaders take, as well as the broader implications for global stability and security. In a dramatic turn of events, a meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the Oval Office erupted into a heated confrontation, casting a shadow over the potential for a crucial deal involving Ukraine's rare earth minerals. What was intended to be a discussion aimed at fostering peace and economic cooperation has instead highlighted deep-seated tensions between the two nations. The encounter, which occurred on February 28, 2025, quickly escalated when Trump, visibly exasperated, admonished Zelenskyy, asserting, "You're either going to make a deal or we're out." The confrontation intensified as Zelenskyy labeled Russian President Vladimir Putin a killer and terrorist, pushing back against Trump's insistence that Ukraine was not sufficiently grateful for U.S. support. This clash culminated in a cancellation of the planned joint press conference and an abrupt exit for Zelenskyy and his delegation from the White House. Following the altercation, Trump took to his Truth Social platform claiming that Zelenskyy had disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office and indicated that the Ukrainian president could return when he is ready for peace. Meanwhile, Zelenskyy expressed gratitude for American support despite the tumultuous meeting, emphasizing Ukraine's need for just and lasting peace. Support for Trump's approach came from various Republican lawmakers, who hailed his exchange with Zelenskyy as emblematic of strong American leadership. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins tweeted that American leadership is back, while Interior Secretary Doug Burgum commended Trump for his resolve in safeguarding U.S. interests abroad. Conversely, criticism poured in from Democrats and international observers. British MP Alicia Kearns described the Oval Office exchange as performative bullying for a domestic U.S. audience, and prominent figures like French President Emmanuel Macron reiterated that Russia was the aggressor in the ongoing conflict. The fractious meeting has raised questions about the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations, particularly regarding a proposed minerals deal that was supposed to signify a significant step toward peace and economic partnership. Trump had previously touted this agreement as a repayment mechanism for the extensive military aid the U.S. has provided Ukraine since the onset of the war in February 2022. However, the abrupt fallout from the meeting has put this deal in jeopardy, with a White House official stating that further discussions would only occur when Ukraine is ready to have a constructive conversation. The underlying causes of the disagreement reflect a broader shift in U.S. foreign policy under Trump, which has increasingly emphasized transactional relationships over traditional alliances. This approach has not only strained U.S.-Ukraine relations but has also raised concerns among European allies who fear that a fractious U.S. stance could embolden Russian aggression. The implications of this meeting extend beyond bilateral relations. Analysts suggest that such public displays of discord could embolden adversaries like Russia, who may perceive a weakening of Western resolve. As the situation develops, it remains to be seen whether Trump's administration can reconcile its approach with the needs of Ukraine and its allies, or if this confrontation signals a deeper rift that could complicate efforts to achieve lasting peace in the region. As the geopolitical landscape shifts, the world watches closely. The fallout from this Oval Office showdown will likely reverberate through diplomatic channels, influencing not only U.S.-Ukraine relations but also the broader dynamics of international diplomacy concerning the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Future meetings and negotiations will be pivotal in determining whether a path toward peace can be forged or if tensions will continue to escalate. In an unprecedented display of diplomatic tension, President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy engaged in a heated exchange during a recent meeting at the White House that culminated in a public confrontation, raising significant concerns regarding U.S.-Ukraine relations and the ongoing conflict with Russia. The meeting was originally intended to solidify a deal granting the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth mineral resources, a strategic asset amid the escalating geopolitical climate. The confrontation unfolded in the Oval Office, with Trump accusing Zelenskyy of being disrespectful and asserting that he had no cards in their negotiations. "You're gambling with World War III," Trump reportedly stated, reflecting the gravity of the discussions surrounding Ukraine's war with Russia, which has persisted for 3 years. Tensions escalated as Vice President JD Vance joined in questioning Zelenskyy about his expression of gratitude towards the U.S. for its support. Zelenskyy, visibly taken aback, defended his record of thanking the American people and government for their assistance, a point he reiterated in a statement following the meeting. Despite the high stakes, the meeting concluded without the anticipated signing of the mineral deal, which White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had described as being very close to the finish line. Instead, Zelenskyy left the White House early, a decision that has been characterized as both a diplomatic setback for the U.S. and a missed opportunity for Ukraine. "This was a disaster, especially for Ukraine," remarked Representative Mike Lawler, a Republican from New York, who described the incident as a failure in effective diplomacy. The fallout from the meeting has drawn a sharp divide in political responses. While some Republicans hailed Trump's aggressive stance as America First, numerous Democratic lawmakers condemned the interaction as a disgraceful display of American diplomacy. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized Trump and Vance for their treatment of Zelenskyy, suggesting that their behavior served to undermine U.S. support for Ukraine in a critical moment. Trump and Vance are doing Putin's dirty work, Schumer stated, a sentiment echoed by several other Democratic leaders who called the confrontation an embarrassment for the nation. Adding to the complexity of the situation, the U.S. State Department announced the termination of a USAID initiative aimed at restoring Ukraine's energy grid, a move that could further weaken Ukraine's position in negotiations with Russia. Critics argue that this decision signifies a lack of commitment from the U.S. to support Ukraine in its ongoing conflict, potentially emboldening Russian aggression. In a surprising development, Trump also indicated his intention to sign an executive order making English the official language of the United States, a move that could have wide-ranging implications for national identity and immigration policy. This decision aligns with Trump's broader agenda of prioritizing American interests but raises questions about the inclusivity of a nation historically defined by its diversity. The confluence of these events highlights a critical juncture for U.S. foreign policy, particularly in relation to Ukraine and its ongoing struggle against Russian aggression. As the political landscape continues to evolve, the implications of this Oval Office encounter may resonate far beyond the immediate fallout, influencing future diplomatic engagements and the broader geopolitical framework. As the situation develops, both Zelenskyy and Trump will need to navigate the complexities of international relations with a focus on achieving peace and stability in the region. The path forward remains uncertain, but the outcomes of these discussions will undoubtedly shape the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations and the broader geopolitical landscape. In a striking turn of events, President Donald Trump is shifting the blame for the nation's economic woes from inflation to what he calls government waste, particularly targeting federal workers and low-income Americans who rely on social services. This pivot comes as Trump grapples with rising inflation rates. His administration's failure to deliver on promises to curtail costs for everyday Americans is becoming increasingly evident. Just 40 days into his new term, inflation has surged, prompting a re-evaluation of his economic strategy. Instead of confronting the reality of inflation, which saw its largest increase in over a year, Trump and his Republican allies have redirected their focus toward alleged waste in government spending. Trump has insisted that to address this so-called waste, his administration will need to crack down on federal funding for programs like SNAP and Medicaid. This shift has raised concerns about the potential erosion of the nation's already fragile social safety net. With Trump enlisting influential figures like Elon Musk to assist in these cutbacks, the implications for millions of Americans are dire. The backdrop of this campaign against waste is not merely political rhetoric, it is backed by strategic frameworks like Project 2025 and the Fiscal Sanity to Save America proposal, which prioritize reducing government spending over addressing corporate greed. With Republicans firmly in control of Congress and the presidency, the stage is set for significant cuts that could impact millions, particularly the most vulnerable. With the recent passage of a budget bill that proposes massive cuts to Medicaid amounting to $800 billion, Republicans are moving swiftly to dismantle social programs. The implications extend beyond federal policy. States are also exploring ways to restrict healthcare and food benefits alongside proposals for government surveillance aimed at policing so-called fraud. While Trump touts his status as an anti-war president, critics argue that the proposed cuts will primarily redirect funds to military contracts rather than improve the living conditions for working-class Americans, which he promised during his campaign. Meanwhile, progressive solutions like universal basic income, which have shown potential for alleviating poverty, are being sidelined in favor of punitive measures that could deter access to essential services. The narrative that frames federal workers and the poor as undeserving recipients of government assistance serves to further divide working-class Americans. Instead of uniting against systemic economic issues, the focus has shifted to scapegoating those who are already struggling. Historical parallels are drawn to past political strategies that vilified marginalized groups to justify cuts to public services, ensuring that the economic burdens are placed on those least able to bear them. As consumer sentiment declines and inflation looms larger, Trump's approval ratings are beginning to reflect public discontent with his economic management. Recent polls indicate a significant drop in approval for his handling of inflation and the overall economy. Discontent is palpable, with a majority of Americans believing that the economy is on the wrong track. This sentiment is reinforced by findings that show a vast majority of citizens find inflation to be a pressing issue, ranking it above other concerns. As the administration continues to advocate for tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, the dual threats of rising prices and job cuts are likely to exacerbate an already precarious economic situation. Companies across various sectors are bracing for price hikes and potential layoffs as they navigate the volatility introduced by these tariffs. Looking ahead, the pressure on the Trump administration will only grow as inflation becomes a more pressing concern for voters. With midterm elections looming, Republican leaders may find their electoral fortunes tied to the public's perception of the economy. As Trump attempts to balance his agenda of spending cuts with the urgent need to address inflation, the path forward appears fraught with challenges that could define his presidency and shape the political landscape for years to come. The question remains whether Trump's strategy will ultimately lead to economic stability or further exacerbate the very issues he seeks to address. In a significant shift in U.S. military policy, President Trump has relaxed restrictions on military operations, empowering commanders to conduct airstrikes and special operations with fewer constraints. This new directive, which dismantles the more cautious approach adopted during President Biden's tenure, signals a return to the aggressive counter-terrorism strategies that defined Trump's first term. During a recent trip to Europe, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth met with military leaders from U.S. Africa Command and signed a directive that expands the latitude commanders have in selecting targets. This approach is a marked departure from the multi-layered vetting processes instituted under Biden, which primarily focused on high-ranking terrorist leaders. According to officials familiar with the policy change, the new directive prioritizes flexibility, enabling quicker responses to emerging threats but also raising concerns about potential civilian casualties and the risk of hasty decision-making. One senior Defense Department official noted that the prior administration's policies echoed those of President Obama's second term, which emphasized strict protocols for airstrikes. Under Biden, the target selection process involved extensive legal reviews to ensure compliance with international law and minimize civilian harm. In contrast, Trump's relaxation of these rules is designed to expedite military action against groups like al-Shabaab in Somalia and the Houthis in Yemen, though it remains unclear if similar directives have been issued to other combatant commands globally. Hegseth confirmed the new policies via social media, asserting that the changes were essential to streamline military operations. However, critics warned that this shift could lead to a higher incidence of misidentifications and collateral damage. The previous administration's stringent criteria required multiple layers of approval and ensured that targets were verified as legitimate threats through rigorous intelligence assessments. The timing of this policy change coincides with a tumultuous period for the Pentagon. In a controversial move, Trump recently dismissed several senior military leaders, including General Charles Q. Brown Jr., the first African American chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This action has drawn ire from 5 former defense secretaries who labeled the firings as reckless and politically motivated, urging Congress to hold hearings to scrutinize the national security implications of these dismissals. They cautioned that politicizing the military could have damaging effects on morale and recruitment. The former officials emphasized that the dismissals, especially of experienced leaders, could deter talented individuals from pursuing military careers and undermine the integrity of the armed forces. They argued that the firings lacked operational justification and called on Congress to question the administration's motives further. In a parallel development, Trump has also initiated an investigation into the national security implications of copper imports under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. This inquiry aims to assess the impact of copper imports on U.S. defense and critical infrastructure, reflecting a broader strategy to bolster domestic production capabilities amid concerns over reliance on foreign supply chains. As these developments unfold, the implications for U.S. military operations and national security remain profound. The administration's aggressive posture and policy relaxations could lead to faster military actions, but at the risk of higher civilian casualties and a potential erosion of public trust in the military. Observers are keenly watching how Congress will respond to these moves, particularly in light of the growing calls for accountability from former military leaders. The future of U.S. military engagement and its governance may hinge on the outcomes of both the revised operational directives and the investigations into recent firings and foreign trade practices. In a dramatic turn of events, a high-stakes meeting between President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House erupted into a heated confrontation, marking a significant escalation in U.S.-Ukraine relations. Initially convened to discuss a potential agreement granting the United States access to Ukraine's rare earth mineral resources, the meeting quickly devolved into a public shouting match, underscoring the rising tensions between the two nations. The encounter, which took place on February 28, 2025, was characterized by sharp exchanges and accusations. President Trump, alongside Vice President JD Vance, chastised Zelenskyy for what they perceived as a lack of gratitude toward the United States for its ongoing support amid the war with Russia. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office, Trump later remarked on his Truth Social platform, suggesting that Zelenskyy was unprepared for any meaningful negotiations regarding peace in Ukraine. Tensions flared when Vance raised the possibility of diplomacy being the path to peace. Zelenskyy, however, vehemently disagreed, citing Russia's breaches of prior agreements and the heavy toll of the ongoing conflict. "He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners," Zelenskyy retorted, highlighting the futility of diplomatic overtures in the face of aggression. This exchange marked a pivotal moment in the meeting as both leaders spoke over one another, revealing deep-seated frustrations and a lack of common ground. The fallout from the meeting resulted in the cancellation of a planned joint press conference and Zelenskyy's abrupt departure from the White House. Following the confrontation, he expressed gratitude for American support on social media, but also hinted at the dire consequences of ignoring Ukraine's plight. "You will feel it in the future," he warned, emphasizing the far-reaching implications of the ongoing conflict. The clash not only derailed talks about the minerals agreement but also reflected a broader shift in U.S. foreign policy under Trump's administration. Critics noted that Trump's increasingly aggressive stance towards Ukraine, including labeling Zelenskyy a dictator and blaming him for the war, has strained relationships with European allies who have traditionally supported Ukraine. The meeting's outcome raised alarms among Democrats and some Republicans, who accused Trump and Vance of echoing Russian narratives and undermining U.S. credibility on the global stage. Senator Lindsey Graham, a prominent voice in favor of U.S. support for Ukraine, described the meeting as a complete disaster, suggesting that Zelenskyy may need to step aside for more fruitful negotiations. In contrast, some Republican allies praised Trump's assertiveness, indicating a divide within the party regarding the approach to Ukraine. While the meeting was intended to solidify a partnership that could enhance U.S. access to critical minerals, the public fallout now casts doubt on future negotiations. Trump's assertion that Zelenskyy must make a deal or we're out suggests a hardening of positions that could further complicate efforts to end the conflict. As the U.S. continues to explore peace talks with Russian officials, the discord evident in the Oval Office could hinder collaborative efforts to stabilize the region. Looking ahead, the implications of this confrontation are significant. Both the U.S. and Ukraine face a precarious path forward as the potential for a minerals agreement now seems uncertain. With Russia's ongoing aggression and internal challenges within Ukraine, the need for a united front among allies has never been more critical. As tensions mount, the international community will be watching closely to see how these developments unfold and whether they will lead to a renewed commitment to peace or further escalation of the conflict.